The delivery. The Leopard 2A4 rolled off the transport truck in the pre-dawn darkness of March 2024, its camouflage netting still damp from the German rain where it had been stored. Lieutenant Dmytro Kovalenko watched as his new command settled onto Ukrainian soil, the diesel engine rumbling to life with a mechanical growl that seemed to promise protection his previous T-64 could never offer. "She's beautiful," whispered Sergeant Alexei Bonder, the gunner who'd survived 3 tank kills in the past 18 months. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the memory of burning metal and the screams of crews who hadn't made it out. The crew had been training in Poland for 6 weeks, learning the German machine systems, its strengths, and, critically, its weaknesses. Dmytro had listened carefully during the classified briefings about the Leopard's vulnerabilities in modern warfare. The tank had been designed to fight Soviet armor across the Fulda Gap, not to survive drone strikes and tandem-charge AEGMs in the fields of Donbass. Corporal Ivan Shevchenko, their loader, ran his hand along the turret's side skirt. 60 tons of NATO engineering, he said, though his voice carried doubt rather than confidence. They'd all heard the reports from the front. Leopards burning, Bradleys torn apart, even Abrams taking catastrophic hits. Modern Russian anti-tank weapons had evolved far beyond what these vehicles had been designed to withstand. Driver Maxim Petrov climbed into his compartment, familiarizing himself with the controls one more time. "How long until we're operational?" he asked. "Command wants us forward in 48 hours, Dmytro replied. "The offensive is stalling near Robotyne. They need armor support." That night, Dmytro couldn't sleep. He walked the perimeter of their assembly area, watching crews prepare their vehicles. Some painted names on their turrets, others welded extra storage racks. Standard modifications, personal touches meant to make these 4 machines feel like home. But Dmytro's mind kept circling back to a conversation he'd had with an old metallurgist from Mariupol, a man who'd worked in the city's steel plants before the war. The metallurgist, now a refugee in Lviv, had shown him something interesting during their training break. How certain composite materials, when layered with reactive surfaces, could dramatically increase protection against shaped charges. "The Germans built a good tank," the old man had said, "but they built it for a different war. Your war needs different solutions." Dmytro had sketched notes, asked technical questions, even brought Alexei into the conversation. The gunner, who'd studied engineering before the war, understood the principles immediately. It was crazy, improvised, probably violated every NATO manual, but it might work. The next morning, Dmytro gathered his crew around the Leopard. "I have an idea," he began, pulling out his sketches. "It's going to sound insane, and it's definitely against regulations, but I need you to trust me." Alexei looked at the drawings, his eyes widening. "You want to build what amounts to custom reactive armor using salvage materials? Not salvaged, purchased. Specific materials that I've researched." Dmytro's finger traced along the vulnerable points of the tank's profile. The Leopard side armor is its weakness. Everyone knows it. Russian crews are trained to target exactly these points. Ivan scratched his head. "Won't this add weight? Affect our mobility?" "Some. But I'd rather be slow and alive than fast and dead." Dmytro looked at each man in turn. "I'm not ordering this. If we do this, we do it together. If it fails, the responsibility is mine alone." Maxim spoke quietly from where he leaned against the tracks. "My brother died in a T-72 last year. Penetration through the side, just like you're describing. If there's even a chance this works." He didn't finish, but his meaning was clear. "We have 48 hours, Alexei said, already calculating. We'll need to source materials, fabricate mounting points, test the weight distribution." He looked up at Dmytro. "And we'll need to keep this very quiet." Dmytro nodded. "Then let's get started." The workshop, the abandoned agricultural repair shop, sat 3 kilometers from their assembly area. Its corrugated metal roof half collapsed from a missile strike the previous autumn. Perfect for what they needed, isolated, covered, and far enough from command that curious officers wouldn't stumble across their project. Dmytro had used his personal funds, money his family had sent, intended for body armor or a better helmet, to purchase materials through civilian contacts in Dnipro. The list was specific, drawn from his conversations with the metallurgist and his own desperate research through technical forums and military engineering papers. Industrial rubber sheets, 10 millimeters thick, Ivan read from the manifest as they unloaded a civilian truck. Steel plates, various thicknesses. Ceramic tiles, these look like bathroom tiles. They are bathroom tiles, Alexei confirmed, examining the boxes. High-density porcelain. The same principle as modern tank armor. Ceramic defeats the penetrator. Backing materials absorb the energy. Maxim hauled in bags of specialized adhesive compounds and bolts. "This is going to work?" he asked skeptically. "In theory, yes," Alexei replied, spreading out technical drawings on a workbench cleared of ancient tractor parts. Reactive armor works by using explosive charges to disrupt shaped charge jets. We can't use explosives, too dangerous, too illegal, and frankly, too complicated. But we can create multiple layers that force any penetrator to work through different material densities. Dmytro studied the Leopard's technical manual, cross-referencing it with their plans. The side skirts are already designed to provide standoff distance from the main hull. We'll build our system to attach to these skirts, creating what amounts to a custom composite armor package. The work began immediately. Alexei designed a layered system. Outer steel plate to trigger the warhead's shaped charge jet at distance. Then a gap filled with rubber to absorb energy and disperse fragments. Then ceramic tiles to shatter and dissipate the penetrator. Then another rubber layer. Then finally a steel backing plate. Each panel was roughly 60 centimeters square, designed to overlap like scales. Ivan proved surprisingly skilled at metalwork, cutting and shaping steel plates with an angle grinder. Sparks flew in the darkened workshop as he worked through the night, creating mounting brackets that could be bolted onto the Leopard's existing armor points without welding. Welding might compromise the original armor's integrity. Maxim handled the adhesive work, carefully layering the ceramic tiles onto rubber backing sheets, according to Alexei's specifications. "This is like making a very violent sandwich," he muttered, spreading industrial adhesive. The biggest challenge was maintaining the tank's balance. Each armor panel added weight. An uneven distribution could strain the suspension or slow their traverse speed dangerously. "We need symmetry," Dmytro insisted, weighing each panel. "If we load one side more than the other, we'll list during maneuvers." By the end of the first day, they had completed 3 panels. By the middle of the second day, exhaustion was setting in. "Coffee," Ivan declared during a break, his hands shaking from fatigue and possibly from breathing too much grinding dust. "I need coffee that could wake the dead." Alexei was running calculations on a battered laptop. The additional weight is approximately 800 kilograms total, within the Leopard's carrying capacity, but we'll notice it in acceleration and fuel consumption. "Can we still fight?" Dmytro asked. "Oh yes, this doesn't affect the turret or main systems. Just means Maxim will need to anticipate slower response during evasive maneuvers." The driver nodded from where he was assembling mounting hardware. "I can adjust. Better slow than penetrated." As the second night fell, they began installation. The Leopard sat in the workshop like a patient undergoing surgery, its sophisticated German engineering about to be augmented with Ukrainian improvisation. Installation. The installation process was more complex than any of them had anticipated. Each armor panel had to be precisely positioned, bolted securely, and checked for interference with the tank's operational systems. "Stop, stop," Alexei shouted as they lifted the first panel into place. "That bracket is going to interfere with the tow cable release. Shift it 10 centimeters forward." Dmytro adjusted their hydraulic jack, borrowed from the motor pool under false pretenses, and they repositioned the heavy panel. The mounting brackets clicked into pre-drilled holes in the Leopard side skirts, a moment of satisfaction that their measurements had been accurate. Ivan worked underneath the tank, threading bolts through mounting points and securing them with industrial lock washers. "If we survive this war," he grunted, "I'm opening a tank customization shop. Apparently, I have a talent." The work was tedious and physically demanding. Each panel weighed approximately 40 kilograms, awkward to maneuver in the confined space of the workshop. They developed a rhythm: measure, position, secure, verify, move to the next section. Maxim discovered a problem during the installation of the rear panels. The exhaust heat, he pointed out. These rubber layers, they'll degrade if they're too close to the engine compartment. Alexei examined the issue. We'll need to create heat shields. More steel, backed with thermal insulation. He added it to their growing list of modifications. By midnight of the second day, they'd covered the tank's entire left side. The panels overlapped like medieval scale armor, creating a distinctive appearance that looked both crude and purposeful. It's not pretty, Dmytro admitted, stepping back to examine their work. Armor isn't supposed to be pretty, Maxim replied. It's supposed to work. They moved to the right side, repeating the process. Fatigue was their enemy now. Tired hands made mistakes, and mistakes on a tank could be fatal later. Alexei forced them to take breaks, checking and rechecking each installation. We do this right, or we don't do it at all, he insisted. The final panels went on as dawn broke on their departure day. They had 3 hours before they were scheduled to roll out to the forward assembly area. Testing, Dmytro ordered. They powered up the Leopard, running through all systems. The turret traversed smoothly. Their panels didn't interfere. The engine rumbled properly. Suspension compressed and extended normally under the additional weight. Ivan loaded a practice round, confirming the main gun operated without issues. All green, he reported. They stood back, examining their creation. The Leopard looked different now, its clean NATO lines broken up by the scales of improvised armor. Paint had been hastily applied to match the camouflage pattern. Though up close, the modification was obvious. Command is going to notice, Maxim said. Let them notice after we prove it works, Dmytro replied. First contact. The convoy rolled south through fields scarred by artillery, past burned-out villages and hasty Ukrainian defensive positions. Dmytro's Leopard, call sign Zelny, Iron, took position in the assault formation assigned to support the 47th Mechanized Brigade's push toward Russian positions near Robotyne. The plan was straightforward: suppress enemy strong points while infantry advanced under their cover. Standard combined arms doctrine practiced by NATO for decades. But doctrine assumed the tanks would survive the engagement. All stations, this is Iron Actual, Dmytro transmitted on the company net. We're entering weapons range. Stay sharp. Through his commander's sight, he scanned the tree line 800 meters ahead. Intelligence reported Russian positions there, infantry with 8 EGMs and at least 1 T-72 in hull-down position. Gunner, identify target. Dmytro commanded as Alexei's thermal sight picked up a heat signature. Target identified, BMP-2 in tree line. Alexei replied, his voice calm despite the tension. Range 750 meters. Fire when ready. The Leopard's 120 mm main gun spoke, the sound deafening even through their headsets. Downrange, the Russian fighting vehicle exploded, its turret flipping through the air. Target destroyed, Alexei confirmed. Then the world erupted. The first anti-tank missile came from their left flank. A Kornet 8 EGM launched from a concealed position. Dmytro saw it for perhaps half a second, a streak of light and smoke arcing toward them. Missile incoming, he screamed, dropping into the turret. The impact was tremendous. The Leopard rang like a bell, metal shrieking, and for a horrifying moment Dmytro thought they'd been penetrated. His hands flew to his body, checking for wounds for fire. Status report, he shouted. I'm okay. Ivan called from the loader's position. Alive, Maxim confirmed from the driver's seat. Hit on the left side, Alexei reported, checking his screens. All systems green. The armor held. Dmytro risked a glance through his periscope. Their improvised armor panel on the left side was destroyed, ceramic shattered, steel plate bent and scorched, but the Leopard's main hull showed no penetration. Their armor worked, Maxim breathed, disbelief in his voice. It actually worked. Don't celebrate yet, Dmytro snapped. Traverse right, find that launch position. Gunners scan for. The second missile hit before he finished speaking, this time impacting the right side. Another thunderous blow, another moment of terror, another miracle. Still alive. Ivan shouted, almost laughing. Still alive. Target acquired. Alexei called out, his training overriding fear. Anti-tank team, 11 o'clock, 600 meters. Fire. The high-explosive round caught the Russian position, silencing it permanently. The battle continued for another 20 minutes, the longest 20 minutes of Dmytro's life. They took 4 more hits. One on the frontal arc that the Leopard's original armor defeated easily, 2 more on their improvised side armor, and one on the rear that fortunately struck the engine compartment's heavy armor. When the firing finally stopped, when the Russian positions were suppressed or destroyed, Dmytro's crew sat in shocked silence. 6 hits, Alexei finally said, checking their battle damage assessment system. We took 6 direct hits. And we're alive, Ivan added. All systems operational. We can still fight. Maxim's voice crackled over the intercom. Sir, Command wants to know our status. Should I tell them about our armor? Dmytro considered for a moment. They'd just proven their modification worked, spectacularly. But they'd also violated regulations, possibly voided warranties, definitely done something NATO never intended. Tell them we're combat effective and continuing mission, he replied. We'll deal with the armor question later. Investigation. The summons came 3 days later, after Zalizny had participated in 2 more engagements without sustaining penetrating damage. Major General Anders Lindberg, a Swedish officer serving as a NATO technical liaison, had flown in specifically to inspect their tank. Lieutenant Kovalenko, the general began, walking around the scarred Leopard. I've read the battle reports. 6 confirmed hits from Cornet ADGMs, 2 from RPG-29s. 0 penetrations. 0 casualties. He paused, touching one of the destroyed armor panels. This is not standard Leopard configuration. Dmytro stood at attention. No, sir. It's a field modification. Designed by whom? By me, sir. Based on research and consultation with a civilian metallurgist. The general's aide, a British captain named Thompson, was photographing every detail of the improvised armor. This is extraordinary work, Thompson muttered. Crude, yes, but the principle is sound. You've essentially created non-energetic reactive armor using commercial materials. General Lindberg examined the layered construction where a panel had been partially destroyed. Walk me through the design philosophy, Lieutenant. Dmytro explained. The layered system, the spacing, the different material densities, the way it forced penetrators to defeat multiple barriers. He showed calculations, sketches, the research papers he'd studied. Who authorized this modification? Lindberg asked. No one, sir. I took personal responsibility. You understand you've potentially compromised the vehicle's warranty, violated safety protocols, and certainly broke several NATO standardization agreements? Yes, sir. I also understand that my crew is alive because of those violations. Thompson finished his documentation and approached. General, with respect, the lieutenant has stumbled onto something significant. This isn't just jury-rigging. This is innovative armor design using available materials. The composite layering, the standoff distance, it's all theoretically sound. And the battle damage assessment proves it works. Lindberg nodded slowly. Lieutenant, I'm not here to punish you. I'm here because we've lost too many Leopards in this conflict, and suddenly one tank crew has found a way to dramatically increase survivability. He gestured to the tank. I need you to document everything. Every measurement, every material source, every installation procedure. The engineering teams at Krauss-Maffei need to analyze this. You're not shutting us down? Dmytro asked, surprised. Shutting you down? Lieutenant, I'm about to make you and your crew very busy. We need to understand if this can be replicated across the Leopard fleet. The general smiled slightly. Though I suspect the formal designation won't be crazy Ukrainian armor trick when it goes into the technical manuals. Over the following days, Dmytro and his crew worked with NATO engineers who had been dispatched to study their modification. They measured, photographed, tested, and documented every aspect of the improvised armor. The ceramic tiles are the key, explained Dr. Helena Kowalski, a Polish materials scientist. You've used high-density porcelain that shatters predictably, dispersing the penetrator's energy. Combined with the rubber backing that absorbs shock and the multiple steel plates that provide structural integrity, it's elegant in its simplicity. Alexei had become the technical liaison, explaining their calculations and design choices. We couldn't use explosive reactive armor, too dangerous for urban operations, too prone to sympathetic detonation. This passive system provides similar protection without those risks. The engineers were particularly interested in the mounting system. "You've avoided welding to the original armor," noted Captain Thompson. "That's actually brilliant. It means we can manufacture these panels as bolt-on kits without modifying the base vehicle." Ivan demonstrated the installation process, showing how a crew could assemble and install the armor panels in field conditions with basic tools. "We did it in a collapsed barn with hand tools," he explained. "Any repair depot with proper equipment could do it faster and better." Maxim provided data on performance impact, fuel consumption, mobility characteristics, suspension stress. "It's not zero cost," he admitted. "We're about 12% slower in acceleration, and our fuel range is reduced by approximately 15%. But those are acceptable trade-offs for survivability." Testing. NATO had transported a damaged Leopard 2A4 to a testing range in western Ukraine, a tank that had been written off as beyond repair after taking catastrophic damage in combat. It would serve as their test subject for replicating Zelizny's armor modification. Dmytro watched as engineers rebuilt the improvised armor system, this time with proper materials testing, precise specifications, and documentation at every step. "The tiles need to be grade 8 porcelain minimum," Dr. Kowalski explained, holding up samples. "Lower grades don't shatter correctly. They crack instead of fracturing, which reduces effectiveness." The rubber compound had been analyzed and improved. "Your industrial rubber worked," Thompson said, "but this military-grade elastic polymer performs better. It has higher energy absorption and better temperature resistance." They'd refined the steel plate specifications, the spacing between layers, even the bolt patterns for mounting. What Dmytro had created through desperation and improvisation was being transformed into proper engineering. The test firing took place on a cold morning in November. A captured Russian Kornet launcher had been positioned 500 meters from the modified Leopard, aimed at the side armor, the same profile that had destroyed so many tanks. "This is Test 1. Announced Colonel Pavel Dvorak, the Czech officer supervising the trials. "Standard Kornet ATGM with tandem heat warhead. This is the same weapon system that has destroyed numerous NATO vehicles." Firing in 3, 2, 1. The missile streaked downrange, impacted precisely where intended. The explosion was massive, and for a moment, everyone feared the worst. Then the smoke cleared. The armor panel was destroyed, ceramic shattered, steel deformed, rubber torn, but behind it, the Leopard's main hull was intact. No penetration. "Incredible," breathed General Lindbergh. "Absolutely incredible." They conducted 15 more tests over 3 days, varying the angles, distances, and weapon types. The improvised armor defeated Kornets, Medes-M missiles, RPG-29s, even a direct hit from a Russian 125mm APFSDS round that struck at an oblique angle. Not every test was successful. A top-attack Javelin missile defeated the system, but that was expected as the armor only protected the sides. A 125mm Sabo round at 90 degrees penetrated, but analysis showed that shot would have also defeated the Leopard's standard armor. The system increases effective side armor by approximately 400 to 500 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor equivalent, Dr. Kowalski reported. Against shaped charge warheads, which are the primary threat in Ukraine, this brings the side armor protection close to the frontal protection values. "Can it be mass-produced?" Lindbergh asked. "Already working on it," replied a German logistics officer. "We can manufacture the panels in Poland and ship them as complete kits. Each kit includes pre-cut panels, mounting hardware, and installation instructions. A trained crew can install the full system in 6 to 8 hours." Thompson was calculating costs. Approximately €15,000 per tank for materials and manufacturing. Compare that to the €6 million cost of a Leopard 2, or the incalculable cost of a trained crew. The decision was made quickly. Production would begin immediately, with initial kits going to Ukrainian Leopard units, then expanding to other vehicles, Bradleys, Martyrs, even adapted versions for lighter armor. Dmytro stood beside Zalizny, watching engineers take final measurements. His improvised solution, born of desperation and ingenuity, was about to become NATO standard. "How does it feel?" Alexei asked, joining him. "Strange," Dmytro admitted. "We were just trying to survive. Now, they're talking about changing doctrine, updating technical manuals, possibly saving hundreds of lives." "That's what soldiers do," Alexei replied. "We adapt, we overcome, and sometimes we innovate." Evolution. 3 months after the testing concluded, Dmytro found himself in a surreal position, teaching NATO armor officers about tank survivability modifications. The briefing room in Grafenwehr, Germany, was filled with crews from multiple nations, all eager to learn about the system that was already being called Kovalenko armor in unofficial channels, though the official designation was far more bureaucratic. Appliqué Composite Side Protection System, Mark I. "The principle is straightforward," Dmytro explained through a translator pointing to diagrams on the screen. "Modern anti-tank weapons rely on shaped charged jets that require precise conditions to achieve penetration. By disrupting those conditions, forcing the warhead to detonate farther from the hull, breaking up the penetrator with ceramic layers, absorbing energy with elastic materials, we dramatically reduce effectiveness." A German captain raised his hand. "But this adds significant weight. How does it affect combat performance?" Maxim fielded that question, providing real-world data from 6 months of combat operations. "Acceleration is reduced, yes, but tactical mobility remains excellent. The Leopard's powerful engine compensates well, and I'll take a slightly slower tank over a penetrated crew compartment any day." Ivan demonstrated the installation process using a mock-up panel. The beauty of the bolt-on design is that it's reversible. If you need maximum speed for a specific mission, you can remove panels. If you're facing heavy anti-armor threats, you install them. Flexibility. Alexei presented the technical evolution. "We've refined the design significantly since the original version. The ceramic tiles are now pre-mounted in frames for easier handling. The rubber compound is military-grade with better temperature resistance. The mounting brackets are universal, fitting multiple vehicle types." The questions came rapidly. Could it work on Abrams? Yes, with modifications to the mounting points. Would it protect against top-attack missiles? No, but that wasn't the design goal. Side armor was the critical vulnerability. What about maintenance? Simple. Damaged panels could be replaced individually without removing the entire system. Dr. Kowalski presented the scientific analysis. "What Lieutenant Kovalenko created through intuition, we've now validated through rigorous testing. The multi-layer composite approach increases survivability by 60 to 70% against the most common anti-tank threats in Ukraine." General Lindbergh concluded the briefing. "Gentlemen, what you've learned today is the future of tank warfare. Not bigger guns or thicker armor, but adaptive protection systems that can be rapidly deployed and modified based on the threat environment." The Ukrainian crew of Zalizny has taught NATO a valuable lesson about innovation under pressure. After the formal briefing, officers crowded around Dmytro and his crew, asking detailed questions, sharing their own experiences, discussing potential modifications for their specific vehicles. A young American lieutenant approached hesitantly. "Sir, I just want to say my unit is deploying to Poland next month. Knowing we'll have this armor, knowing it's been proven in real combat, it matters." "Thank you." Dmytro felt the weight of responsibility in those words. His desperation innovation had become something larger, a genuine contribution to armored warfare doctrine. That evening, the crew gathered in their temporary quarters. They'd been away from Ukraine for 2 weeks, away from the war, surrounded by the comfort and safety of Germany. "I miss the front," Ivan admitted quietly. The others nodded. Despite the danger, despite the constant threat, that was where they belonged, with their brothers in arms, fighting for their country. We'll be back soon enough, Dmytro assured them. Command wants us to return with the first production kits, help train other crews on installation and combat employment. Then we'll be right back in the fight, Alexei said. But this time, a lot more of our people will come home alive. Legacy. Zaluzhny rolled back into Ukraine in January 2025, its armor now a production standard system rather than a desperate field modification. The tank had become something of a legend, the vehicle that had survived what should have been fatal hits and sparked a revolution in armor design. Dmytro's crew had trained 15 other Leopard crews on the new system. The armor kits were flowing into Ukraine now, retrofitting not just Leopards, but adapted versions for Bradleys, Martyrs, and even some upgraded Soviet-era vehicles. The impact was immediate and measurable. Tank losses from side hits dropped by 63% in the first month. Crew survivability increased dramatically. Other armies took notice. Poland ordered kits for their entire Leopard fleet. The Czechs began adapting it for their T-72 upgrades. Even the Germans started retrofitting their active-duty Leopards. But Dmytro knew the real legacy wasn't in the statistics or the military decorations or the technical manuals. It was in the letters he received from crews who'd survived hits that should have killed them, from families thanking him for bringing their sons and daughters home, from fellow officers who now had hope that innovation could trump superior enemy numbers. One letter stood out, from a corporal named Andrei whose Leopard had taken 3 hits in a single engagement near Bakhmut. "Sir, I don't know if this reaches you, but I wanted you to know we're alive. All 4 of us walked away. The armor you designed took the hits meant for us. My daughter will grow up knowing her father. That's because you refused to accept that our tanks were too vulnerable, that we just had to accept losses as inevitable. Thank you." The war continued, brutal and grinding. Zaluzhny fought in a dozen more engagements through the winter and into the spring. They took additional hits. The count was now at 14 confirmed impacts without penetration, and each time, the crew said a silent prayer of thanks for that desperate innovation in an abandoned workshop. One evening, after a particularly fierce battle near Tokmak, Major General Lindbergh visited their position. He'd come to see Zaluzhny again to document its battle damage for ongoing research. 16 months since your modification, he said, examining new scars on the armor panels. The tank that should have been destroyed a dozen times over. NATO engineers are still studying your design, still finding ways to improve it. We just wanted to survive, sir, Dmytro replied. And in trying to survive, you've saved hundreds, perhaps thousands of others. Lindbergh gestured to the scarred but functional tank. This is what separates good soldiers from great ones. Not following the manual, but knowing when to write a new page. That night, Dmytro stood watch while his crew slept, looking up at stars obscured by smoke from distant artillery. He thought about the journey from desperate lieutenant to unwitting military innovator, from improvised armor panels in a collapsed barn to NATO doctrine. The war would end eventually, all wars did. But the lesson would remain. That innovation came from necessity, that survival required adaptation, and that sometimes the craziest ideas were exactly what was needed. Alexei joined him on watch, 2 old friends who'd survived impossible odds together. "Do you ever think about what happens after?" Alexei asked. "When the war ends?" "Sometimes," Dmytro admitted. "But right now, I think about tomorrow's mission, about bringing our crew home again, about making sure every other crew has the same chance we had." "The chance you gave us," Alexei corrected, "with your crazy armor trick." Dmytro smiled in the darkness. "It was pretty crazy, wasn't it? Completely insane. Brilliant, but insane." Alexei paused. "I'm glad you were crazy enough to try." They stood in comfortable silence, 2 soldiers who'd faced death together and found a way to cheat it, whose desperation had become innovation, whose survival had become legacy. Somewhere in a factory in Poland, new armor kits were being manufactured. In Germany, engineers were designing next-generation versions. In Ukraine, crews were installing the systems and rolling into combat with renewed confidence. And in a forward position near Tokmak, Zaluzhny, the tank that should have died 6 times over, sat ready for tomorrow's battle, its scarred armor testament to Ukrainian ingenuity determination, and a refusal to accept the impossible. The crazy armor trick had worked, and it would keep working, saving lives, one protected tank at a time.